Hello and welcome everyone in another episode of Researcher Celebrity. Today we have Miss Esme with us and a little bit about Esme. She has done her bachelor's in Utah from Utah Tech University in Biological Sciences and currently is a PhD student at Department of Entomology at Texas A&M University. Thank you very much, Esme, for taking time out.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here.
Yes, so we always start our conversation that how and when you decided that you wanted to be a researcher.
Yeah. So during my undergraduate research, I kind of decided that I wanted to go to grad school based on the research that I had done. I really had become interested in that field just in general, and I knew that I wanted to go into like entomological genetics, that sort of field just in general. When I was in my probably junior or senior year of my undergraduate, so that's kind of when I first decided.
Nice. So entomology and genetics, so this is very specific to join a graduate program.
Yes.
So first, the passion behind choosing these two, and then second, that when you made up your mind that you want to join the graduate program, then what were the things which you searched or did your research before joining a lab?
Yeah, so I knew that I was interested in genetics just kind of as a concept overall. When I did my undergraduate research, I had the opportunity to work with mosquitoes, and from there that's kind of when I realized that I didn't necessarily want to work with humans at all, and I didn't know for a long time that there were other fields besides just like human research. So that opportunity that kind of opened the doors for what I wanted to do just in general. So I was able to kind of specify in what I wanted to do in that regard. And when I was looking for graduate programs, I was looking specifically for graduate programs that weren't human genetics. So that was kind of narrowed my options quite a bit because that's a lot of what we have out there, which is great and it's such a good field, but it's just not where my interests lie. So I was looking for departments that had like anything other than like non-model organisms was what I was really interested in. So I looked in different parts of Texas because I know that I wanted to be in Texas, and I just looked at different websites, and I also was reading papers in like specific areas that I was interested in the research, and then going to the websites of those researchers and seeing if they had like a lab and what kind of lab they had and all those sorts of dynamics.
Nice. So this is very basic thing to start with, like reading the papers of area of your interest. And this is something which we always tell to our audience that whenever you are deciding, so the first thing which you decide is your area of interest, what you really want to pursue, because PhD, as we always say, is a long-term commitment. It's not something you can walk in without giving the due thought. And as Esme said, she was clear that she does not want to do so many things, which narrowed it down that what exactly you really want to do. So Esme, mosquitoes is not one of those favorite things in general for any human being, but when it comes to girls, it brings it to the next level that no, this is really not what I want to. So is there any story or your passion which brings you to the mosquitoes?
Yeah, so during my undergrad I kind of just had the opportunity placed on me. Like I was given two areas that I could research. So I come from a really small university, and so we didn't have a lot of research opportunities. So there was one researcher that she worked with cancer, and then another researcher that worked with mosquitoes. So it's not like I was necessarily super passionate about mosquitoes at the time, but I knew that I was interested in ecology. So this project kind of combined ecology and genetics. So this is why I took on that first project during my undergraduate, and from there I just kind of realized that there's a lot more to the field than what I was looking at. So that's kind of where I think developed a lot of my passion for this research.
Nice. And this is very important because when you are passionate about something, to start with you need at least that threshold, because then obviously you build on top of that. So when you finally joined the lab, you know the repute of the lab is high.
Yes.
People worship almost the work which comes out from your lab. So then when you join a lab, what are the set of, or you say that before joining a lab, in United States you have these opportunities to do the rotation.
Yes.
So where you spend time in different labs and then you choose. So before joining a lab, what are the things which all our PhD students should consider, because it is very important. So what you have done for yourself and what you suggest now based on your experience.
So when I was deciding a lab, there was quite a few things that I kind of was looking for. I wanted a PI that was more hands-off rather than hands-on, because I can't work with someone breathing down my neck for sure. So that's what I wanted. But I wanted an environment where there was going to be a lot of help available if I needed it. So I wanted my PI to be available when I need, or there be like research scientists or postdocs or older grad students that I would be able to go to if I needed help. And a couple of the other labs that I had rotated with previously didn't have that. And so that was kind of one of the reasons that I didn't join those labs. And then another thing that I was looking for was a PI that was going to let me do what I want and explore my kind of creative options and things like that. So I wanted I think hands-off is not a great word because it seems like they're completely uninvolved, but a researcher, like a PI that would be involved still, but like just be more of a guiding hand more than anything.
So it's like more of a mentor, which you are saying that, which can see that what is your potential and then guide you to all those hurdles which you come across.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
PhD, as all of us know, is a tough road path. How is it going for you? And then, excuse me, what you have learned from it till now, and how you see the path?
So it's been tough for sure. I think it's been pretty hard. The first few months when I joined, it was really hard just kind of getting my footing and realizing what I needed to do in order to get my project started and things like that. It was a lot of reading and a lot of getting background on my field, and that was really definitely a tough period for me. But now that I'm like producing data and I know where I'm at, and I'm kind of getting ready for my next committee meeting and things like that, it's been a lot smoother and better, and I'm feeling a lot better about it. But it's definitely been tough, but I didn't expect anything less.
Absolutely, because all of us knows that PhD is something which trains you for the rest of your life. It is not just a degree, which we always say at this platform. And for all of our students who really want to make up their mind before joining a lab, these are the things which Esme just mentioned about are very important. And also the second thing is like, you should always be open, and you should always join a PI which gives you all the required help, whatever is needed during your tenure, but also gives you the freedom, the wings, that if you are curious about something, you should have your own project to explore, because PhD is part of that. So Esme, now into the hardcore research, okay? When whatever you have thought of is, as you said, now starting generating the data and then soon publishing the paper. So what is till now, what is the most challenging part of research, if you have to mention? And then what is the part which you think is the most fruitful in the research?
I think the most difficult part is kind of what I'm experiencing right now, where I'm generating results, but they're not necessarily meeting what my hypothesis was. And I think that's kind of a hard conclusion to come to a lot of times, because I'm facing kind of a point at which I might need to change the way I go about my project and like things like that. And of course that's just part of the research, but I'm newer to this, so it's been a little bit more challenging for me to not get discouraged over that. And it's definitely, I've had to have a shift in my mindset in order to kind of handle that gracefully. So that's definitely been the most difficult. And I think the most fruitful definitely would have to be like just being able to like learn new things.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so much fun to challenge myself and do things that not that I necessarily didn't think I was capable of doing, but just that I didn't know I had the scope to do and things like that. So I really enjoy just learning new techniques and new protocols and things like that.
This brings us to next two questions. The first one will say that we always say that never marry an idea or a hypothesis when you are joining a PhD lab.
Yeah.
Be always dynamic, because sometimes you might get the result which support your hypothesis and sometimes it's not. So, but that's how research is in general. We all know about that part.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see the deviation from your hypothesis, based on your own experience, what do you suggest to the students or researchers who are in the similar boat? They are still not done with their qualifying exams and then at the edge of it, and so your approach and what you will suggest to them?
I think just that a lot of times I feel like I have taken it personally when things go wrong, and I think just having that separation between you and yourself and your research, I think a lot of us take to heart like our work and it becomes part of us. So I think separating that is very important, like just for your mental health in general, but also just so that your research can be more successful. Because if you have this, like all these biases, that can create so many issues if you're going ahead with your work and research. So I think in separating that is very important.
Absolutely, and this brings us to the important question of mental health in PhD students in all around the world, which has been seen, and so after spending number of years in a lab, students either drop out through the PhD or in very sad circumstances they commit suicide. So where do you think the main problem lies? Is it the research, or it is about not acknowledging the mental health, or it is about the peer pressure? What are your thoughts about these either dropouts or for the suicides?
I think it's very circumstantial for sure, and I feel like a lot of what I've seen, at least in like people that I've known that have dropped out, it's oftentimes just having not a good work-life balance and not having a support system. So that support system can be anyone, you know, like your family, your lab mates, your friends, a therapist, whatever. I think having that during a PhD program is so important, because you need to be able to step back from what you're doing and just get like reframed. And I always advocate for therapy. I think that's such a good thing that everyone, I feel like, should do. And it's definitely nice to have like an unbiased person that you can go to and talk about this that isn't directly involved in what you're doing. And then the lack of work-life balance really takes a toll on people. I really admire people that work a lot of hours and work very hard and are in the lab every weekend and all day and all night. But I think having that balance and setting limits and boundaries for how long you're going to be there and what you're going to accomplish and things like that, I think is so important to keeping your mental health in check.
Absolutely, and this is next level of mental health is like, if you are stressed and it is chronic, then it started showing up in your physical health also. Then now you are all the time fatigued. You can do things very effectively if you are refreshed, regenerated and rejuvenated. So these are the things. Now people started talking about mental health, about the circumstances where if you have option available for therapy, as Esme said, is a very viable option which I believe everyone should approach, because if you don't have a very supportive system, either it is be friends or family or your peers in lab, wherever you find that environment where you can go out and talk to people, explain your situation, because sometimes what has been observed in researchers all around the world, that they just need someone to talk to, they might come up with their own solutions once they are more calm and they are not stressed about it. We all know that stress is integral part of any human's life. Researchers are no exception. But the second thing is, some people try to push really hard, as you said, taking it for personal, which should not be there. There should be always this separation with work-life balance and also with you and your personality in as a researcher. We have often seen that researchers take it like, how can I make this mistake? They go really hard on themselves, which is not going to help anyone.
Yeah.
And sometimes this is the reason why people feel imposter syndrome and they face through it. So have you seen people, going through that, or ever felt yourself that you don't belong to there? So then how you deal with that?
Yeah, I've definitely felt a lot of that, especially when I first started the PhD program and joined the lab at least. I think just taking a step back and telling yourself that you do belong there and these are just thoughts that you're having, as long as you're putting in the work. Yes. Of course. Because there are people that maybe aren't putting in the work, and it's maybe we need to actually take a step back and think about and refocus. But oftentimes it's some of the hardest working people are the ones that feel like they don't belong the most. And I think it's a lot of different issues that can culminate and kind of lead to that. But I think just telling yourself that these are just thoughts that you're having and they're not a reflection of who you are, and separating that and taking that mentality gracefully and being nice to yourself about it, and feeling these thoughts, checking yourself to see if what kind of work you're putting in, and going from there. And another thing that I feel makes it often really bad is comparing yourself to other people. That can make it just exacerbate it so much. So I think just being within yourself and not comparing yourself to other people can really help to mitigate that.
No, I think this is one of the most important part of any human life, that there should be no comparison. Everyone is unique in their skill set as well as in their experiments also. But when any researcher in the field faces all the failed experiments and they try to push themselves even more harder and apparently results in burnouts. So your experience with that, and then what you suggest to all the audience, that what they should do when they feel the burnouts?
I think it's hard to say, because when you're experiencing burnout, I think the last thing that you think you should do is take a step back. But I think taking a step back is one of the best things that can help you. And also reprioritizing your time and your goals, and what your abilities are to give to your work or your lab or whatever that means. I think just reframing that and getting the right idea of your boundaries and expectations, because oftentimes I feel when people experience burnout, it's because they are going above their means. And I think restructuring your life in order to maintain your boundaries, I think, is one of the most important things that you can do to
Absolutely. And this is when you do this part, when you say that, okay, you were supposed to perform some experiments within the timeline limits because the PI's grant is due. Okay, so then this is the pressure which comes from PI that, hey, I need this data, which is normal. And once you are doing through this, probably you will be at the same position at some point or the later in your life. That's what all the researchers at least try to have their own research group and then become PI. But you have to understand that everyone has their own limitations and their boundaries, their strength and their weaknesses. You should always stay awake that what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and always everyone wants to overcome on their weaknesses, and that's part of human behavior, especially for researchers, because they do this very little bit and tiny dissections of their thoughts, of their experiments, while doing all the troubleshootings. But when we talk about restructuring it, because you know that you are not in one of the best frame set of your own mind. The work which you in on any average day you can perform in n number of hours, and now you cannot accomplish it. So either it is more, or even within that there are the results are on the only the failures. So these are the things where you should always try to see that what is going wrong, because in troubleshooting the first thing is like everyone knows some things are not working, that's why you have to do this all the reverse but for the restructuring part, Esme, when you suggest that people should try to separate the boundaries and restructure the stuff, when comes the environment of the lab, where people say that in some of the labs it is so good that people talk to each other, share all their problems, and then getting help from peers is very easy and effective way to doing all of this. But there were labs also which we had our researcher celebrities mentioning that some of the time it is so toxic environment. Then how a researcher should approach this?
I think that's very difficult because it would depend, I think, on the lab environment and the PI that's present. But I think just having to stand your ground, I think, is one of the most important things that you would be able to do. And I think using yourself kind of as leverage and just being like, well, I need to restructure this in this way, and I need to set these boundaries in order to perform at this level that I'm setting. And if not, this is not a professional setting that I can work in, so we might be losing that relationship. And I know that's not like probably the best way, but that's kind of what I would, I think, do in that scenario, where it's like, this is how I can perform, otherwise we need to kind of reevaluate whether or not this relationship is going to work out, I think is...
No, absolutely. I think we agree with this part, and we always tell at this platform that people should be very vocal about their thoughts, and every single researcher, either you are any stage of your research career, be a PhD student, early faculty, going through the tenure track and all that, there should always be an option of saying no to no matter what it is, because ultimately people do talk about power dynamics in research, be it within the lab, within the colleagues, or with the PI mentor. If you know what you are doing is good for you, it probably is good for the lab, it probably is good for the group as whole. But if you think that you are compromising either with your working hours or with your physical health by extending and giving more than what it is required, I think is not a good idea, because we always say that if the stress is chronic, probably this is not for you, and either it is research or for any other way, it should not be. Temporary stress is part of human life, no one can escape that, and researchers again are no example for that. So when we talk about power dynamics, we know that in United States it's way different than any other part of the world. But what were your observations which you have seen in very small span of your research life, and then what you suggest people that how they should approach that, or if they feel that there is some irregularities going on, how they should address it?
So I think power dynamics is such an interesting topic too, and it's something that I think a lot about. From what I've observed, at least, there's often times where it's like men often are in these power dynamics that are present in like academia or whatever that I've seen present, and it creates a lot of, it can create internal conflicts for sure, and I've definitely seen a lot of those, or people leveraging their positions or things like that in order to push an agenda or something like that. And I think dealing with those, really the best way that I've seen, at least, is just maintaining your standards and your morals and trying to stand up for, whatever you are trying to advocate for, or whether that's yourself or an organization or whatever. I think those are kind of probably the best ways that I've seen demonstrated within academia.
So this brings us to next point of women in STEM. What are your thoughts at this early stage that if people have to talk about women in STEM, why and how they should address it?
So I think it's good for us to advocate for women in STEM for sure. I think it's becoming. It depends on the place where we're at, of course, because different places in the world are going to have different issues that they're facing. But from what I've seen, advocating for women in STEM and getting women involved in science, just in general, whether that's at a higher level or lower academic level, I think it's great to see that happening. And addressing this, I think having spaces where women are welcomed and their voices are going to be heard. A lot of times that has to do with kind of the power dynamics thing and maybe women not being heard in the same capacity that, say, men are heard. I think it's important to hold space for women and their thoughts and their ideas.
So Empowering Science Foundation believe in breaking the barriers, and part of our dedication to researcher celebrities, like we have celebrated Women in STEM special month, all the videos, all our researcher celebrities from different stages of their research career, starting from PhD student to emeritus scientist who was a successful entrepreneur. But one thing which always come up, that some of them has the thought that why there is this debate that when people do say that women in STEM needs to be discussed, and some say that they are equally competent that as males, then why there is no question that, oh, the father has to go to take care of the kids, the mother is doing the same. So they say that this is not worth discussing, instead discussing the science is way more important. And when you say that being advocate, taking your own stance is very important for every single researchers in the field. So when you discuss these thoughts at different stages in your social life, in your professional life, what are the things which you get that is there any change in current couple of years which you have observed that people are addressing it more, or we still need to do a lot more to acknowledge the due diligence to women?
Mm-hmm. I think that in the past few years, I probably haven't noticed a huge difference, but if you think over the span of time, of course, we've come such a far way, like a long way, and I think it's very impressive to see what we've done even in the past, say, 50 years. And I think there's always places to improve, and I think it's great to advocate for women. I agree that science should be first and everything else should be second, but there are still places in every country, in every part of the world, where women aren't being heard in the same capacity that men are, just because of the biases and the social standards that we have set within our society. So I think that maintaining that advocacy, I think is important.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for women that are coming from maybe, say, like lower income backgrounds or minorities, things like that. I think it's very important to hold space for anyone that's still needing that as well. So I think bridging that gap is very important for those disparities.
Absolutely, and we do support that part. Now, if we talk about the conflicts based on this gender bias, and now we see that people are sometimes not fair, and this is not exception to most of the places anyways. So when you say or what another thing which is very important part, like when a person is facing the discrimination, they are calculating so many things that because of their standard, because of their requirement, they sometimes shut off themselves, but the other people still in the group can see that. So what are your thoughts about this, that should they be more vocal and supportive to the person, or if we can say the victim here?
I think it's difficult, and I think it's going to be circumstantial for sure in every regard. But I think finding a balance, between the two. I would always say to advocate for yourself, but there's not always scenarios in which you can be vocal about that, and you can like stand up for yourself just because of, you know, whatever situation that you're placed in or anything like that. But I think in forming, say, like a committee or something like that, where you are going to be having like representation from people that will be able to advocate for you, I think is so important, and having like not completely homogenous kind of setups in any sort of like committee or like whatever you're forming and whatever board member or whatever. I think having that like mix of ideas and a mix of different things, that different places that people are coming from, would be very beneficial in making sure that like advocacy or holding of space would be present, that were happening.
Absolutely, and I think this is why we do talk about the role of peers and support system is so important for any researcher, because they are spending so much of time in the labs, and sometimes it is way extended, either late hours in the night or early mornings. So let's make this scenario that a girl wants to do some work in late in the night and not comfortable in, but just by working alone. So what are the things what they should all consider, or you know, asking for the help from the lab people or to the supervisor, how they should manage this?
I think that maybe talking with your like PI or whoever that would be supervising you about what times, I guess, you would be able to come in, because it's like, of course, I understand feeling uncomfortable being late at night, but maybe like saying, oh, maybe you could come in earlier in the morning and like start a little bit earlier, things like that, I think would work out, because there's not like another, I feel like, feasible idea where you can say, oh, I can have someone come with you, because that's not just like an option, I think. But there's always like what is it called, like police and things like that can be present, but it's not like really super feasible. So I think just having that conversation where it's like meeting in the middle between the two would be important in that scenario.
Yeah, and so here I would like to take this moment to all the women in STEM researchers at their early stage, because when these are the time when you are setting up the pace for your life, for your research, and for the work culture, which probably so PhD is a training, and then you will learn what to do and also will learn what not to do. So these are one of those things when you decide that you should be in charge of your own timetable. Your time management is your thing. There is no one should tell you that at what point of time you should be in the lab, either, especially when it is outside the working hours. So super early mornings or super late night. Even if work it demands it, you should be very clear in your head that if you need someone to be more comfortable so that you can work there. Yes, what drives all of us at this platform is the research. The name is Researcher Celebrity. But even integral to that is that every single person is human being, and if you are not calm at mind, there is no way you can perform your research experiments or anything else which you should do the way you want. So be very vocal about it, know your rights and follow it. If you think that there is someone who's trying to play any kind of power dynamics, there are agencies, there are committees where you can approach, because if you think that you are the only one facing this and are ready to just walk with that, I think what you are doing is you are making it more problematic for the next generation to come in, because you are supporting that system without acknowledging it, which should not be done. And at Empowering Science Foundation, when we say breaking the barrier, this is one of the barrier where people say that oh, if you are experiencing, don't tell to anyone. Why? You should tell to everyone. You should be very clear about it, because you want to build a network where people can actually feel free to work. They are there for a reason because they enjoy the research. Esme, coming back to the research part, what was the most fun thing that has happened to you in this small time when you saw your research?
I think little experiments working out has been just the highlight of my journey, especially after working months and months to get some of my cloning work done, and then finally getting that result. I think it's just very fun and exciting. So I think it's quite grueling most of the time. So I think finally getting like any sort of positive result is always very fun.
And I think this is the most accomplishing part of any researcher, when they get all those positives in there.
Yeah.
So you are now, now we are walking at the edge of our conversation. I would like to ask your suggestions for people who are not clear that they are in the dilemma that should they join PhD or not. What are the things they should consider? Be absolute before joining the course.
I think knowing that it's going to be hard work, and harder work than you've experienced before. I actually have one of my closest friends. She just finished her master's degree, and she wanted to go on to get a PhD. And I saw a lot of things in her that I knew she wouldn't be able to kind of do it, you know? And I think some of those things were just like a lack of discipline, and that's probably one of the biggest ones. So I kind of advised her against doing that, just because I knew that it wouldn't really work out. And she obviously had to decide on her own whether or not that was something that you can do. But I think knowing yourself and your level of discipline is so important to know whether or not this is something that if you want to do or you're able to do, I think is so important. And your level of commitment to something that you might not get to like choose your project per se, or you might not get to join the lab that you wanted. Things like that can happen. And not everything is going to pan out perfectly the way that you want it, but having the patience to not endure, that feels like a bad word, but just kind of like get through that and any sort of hardship that you can. A lot of endurance, I think, is very important as well. So just knowing yourself and like your levels at which you perform, I think, is very important.
Absolutely. And I think what Esme said is the most important part. Before committing yourself to PhD, just be sure that you are signing it up to do it, not to quit first. But at any point of time, if you feel that it is not working out the way you wanted, there should not be any shame to say no to it also, because at the end of the day, all of us are human beings, and we should do what makes us happy. What makes us happy, if that is research, absolutely, why not? And then there is no looking back after PhD, that is for sure. That the most struggle which everyone faces in their life probably is during the PhD time. But once you are through with it, there is no looking back, because now you got all the training, be it about the time management, about dealing with conflicts, about the human resources. You are trained for everything, and now you are a full one packet for everything. You can perform whatever you really want. But Esme, we'll say thank you very much for sharing this thought-provoking, I will say, because the student should always be doing their analysis before this. And at the end, what we always say, that all of our researchers are celebrity. Our audience can contact you directly if they need some guidance, support from your side. And if to all the audience also, that if you want Empowering Science Foundation to put you in touch with our other researcher celebrities, please feel free to write it to us, and we will put you in touch with our researcher celebrities. The idea behind this series is to develop a network where people can come, share their journey, and get help on the troubles which they are facing. With this, we'll say thank you, Esme.
Thank you.
And to all, stay tuned for another episode of Researcher Celebrity.